Hello everyone and welcome back to Crypto Atlas. In today's video, we will be talking about yearn.finance. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin and just a little bit of an update again on Orchid. Nothing super major that we could find there, but I do want to take a look at the charts for you guys. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button. As you guys can see up above, we are on a goal trying to get to our first 500 subscribers. And if you do enjoy this content, I'd love for you to be a part of this community. I do value your guys' opinions as well, so leave a comment down below what you think about today. And please, don't forget to hit that like button, guys. Maybe we could try to push for 50 likes on this video. Let's start off with yearn finance. You guys can actually take a look right here and see that the price has climbed up. It is at $32,175. Absolutely tearing it up. I mean, we could see that it's on the fourth day of a rally right here. It is above its 21 EMA. It's holding strong at the moment. A little bit of a pullback on the actual daily. But what was this sort of pump and slight dump action that we can see on here? If you just kind of zoom in a little bit, what is it exactly that's kind of led to this rally? Was there anything significant? Was it about protocol, anything like that? Well, from what I could tell, it's primarily related to Gemini. Gemini has just listed 15 DeFi tokens. If you guys are not familiar with Gemini, this is an exchange that was created by the Winklevoss twins. The Winklevoss twins, which were a part of that movie talking about the origins of Facebook, because they were involved in the beginning in the development of Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. So these guys, they own a lot of Bitcoin, very smart guys. And you can actually see right here that apart from Uniswap, Gemini also listed Balancer, Curve, Red Network, Synthetic Network, UMA, and yearn.finance. The move has got all these right down here that you can see being listed. We'll talk a little bit more about this in regards to the Bitcoin in just a second. But looking at the actual chart itself, the fact that over in New York City, the ability to have all these is very beneficial. It's something that has just kind of placed itself in a little bit of a foothold that hasn't really been established there yet. So this is great news as far as for New York City and DeFi space for sure. Aside from that, let's go ahead and take a look at Orchid. And then I got some really good information going on with Bitcoin. So don't go anywhere on this. I think you guys definitely want to take a look at this. So looking over on Orchid, you can see that we have this big consolidated space. And by the way, Orchid, I talk about it a lot. It's a project that I have invested in as an altcoin. I find it very valuable. You may have something else of a project, and if there's something really that you guys want to see, I got people to leave comments that say like, hey, can you look at this one? Can you look at that one? I'm not really getting much as far as like a bunch of people asking on the same specific one. So the more that you guys talk to me in the comments and trying to find information or news or little tidbits that seem really interesting, that little nugget that maybe somebody missed, I need you guys to make sure that you do comment down below. Other people look at that information too. So looking at this for Orchid, we can see the Fibonacci retracement, which I had previously set up, that now we've established more time throughout it, and there's this big consolidated space that's been formed essentially between the 0.618 and the 0.786, and within this region zone, this also rests currently above the 21 EMA. As of the daily, you can see that there is just a little bit of a decline as of the time of this video on Orchid itself, down about 1% change with the 30 cents that we're at. You don't notice it that much. So it's essentially right around a 29-30 cent range within this zone. Now, if it goes up to the higher levels, you're looking right around 32 cents to 37 cents, which if you own a large volume at such a low price, that can start to affect 1 cent change dramatically your overall investment portfolio. As you guys can see here, we have a lot of tall climbs up and pulls down, so high wicks on the top end. You can see some instances here of it also including on the bottom end, but overall, we have been having a steady decline. Bitcoin itself has been suffering a little bit, but you can see that actually on the daily, Bitcoin is up about 0.5%. We'll take a look more at that in just a minute here. So basically, looking at this chart, we're in a descending wedge pattern, and overall you still have a large gap of space that it fills within that from the highs and from the lows if we take a look on the actual wicks themselves. So the more general consensus is that the patterns that are being formed, that's where I created these lines, and so far everything is validating within that space. We're consolidating between the 0.5 and the 0.618 currently, and once it makes the next major move, as you can see, it's essentially tested just below into the 0.5 and come back up. Once we breach into another zone, we're going to have a different story. This consolidated space, where the majority of it has taken place before, I find pretty interesting. If we can cross above the 21 EMA, there's not much more room that's needed to go not only above the resistance, but also to re-enter into that consolidated space. It's got a little bit of headway that it needs to go before it can actually really rally up into the next zone. But you can kind of see that when it has formed inside this space, there's been some major action that's taken place, and it's predominantly encompassed within that whole range. I mean, large sections filling within that space. So we could see it test all the way up top, pull back, all the way pushing through. I would like to ideally personally see a day or two of actual establishment above the 0.786 level before it has a further continuation. As it is right now, if I am bullish or bearish, right now I am still bearish. I mean, I love the project, don't get me wrong, and I've heard a lot of exciting things, and I own a lot of this. This dotted line you see down here is a buy level that I have. I just barely missed it down here, but just pulling slightly below the 0.382. I've got a nice little bag already going on, but I can add to it, and I can actually dollar cost average a little bit further down. I wasn't as lucky as some of you guys that are watching out there in the video from these early days, so I wish I had that opportunity. But right now, I'm still bearish, still needs to break above the 21 EMA, in my opinion. We need to see an influx in volume, such as we have here. Most of the volume has been pretty low, and you can actually see that yesterday especially, quite low. Bitcoin having a little bit of a rally could be a good leading indicator into something like this, but we need some more news to come out. I think Orchid having gone on more exchanges is great, but it needs to have more applications, and there's a lot of discussions about different markets that it could be applied to. And I think now that it's establishing itself on these exchanges, if it's not being on the exchanges themselves and Bitcoin rallying up, that's really going to spark that push up in price on this, then I think it's going to be the fact that it enters into another market space that has a high level of demand. There's still a lot of these tokens that need to be released off of the total supply. And with the production rate that's going on, it's going to be a little bit rocky waters here. There's some high volume trades you can see on their website of when they're getting ready to release these. So you want to take it on a day-by-day basis, right? No one can predict the market. And anyone that says that they can, they're just lying, right? They're just using these words. It's not predictions. They're forecasting, just like with the weather. You're playing odds, and it's more likely that it's going to do one thing over another, but the weather can be unpredictable at times, right? So you look at historical trends, and this is where we base a lot of these things off of. So realistically, all these YouTubers that you see that say the price predictions, they're just using these words to essentially entice people to make them feel like they are the smart ones and they've got the most credible information. I respect the people more often that are less credulous about themselves, saying that they're the best crypto channel for this and that reason or whatever, right? Just be a little bit more humble, and realistically, you have your point of view, you have your reference points, you're using the tools that you feel are the most reliable, but you're not always right. I'm not always right. Leading indicators with this, in my opinion, is suggesting that we're more bearish right now. I want to see it go above this yellow line, the 21 EMA, go above the resistance, and I'd like to see what it does within this space. I don't know if it's going to have a major move. It could be unpredictable and have a further continuation on. I already own some. I'm preparing myself for lower levels. There's not too much lower levels if it goes down below that. So that's it for Orchid, and that is it for yearn.finance. Now let's go ahead and talk about Bitcoin. And again, guys, if you are new to the channel, we're trying to push for that 500 sub goal. Hopefully you're enjoying this information. You're more than welcome to share this with other people too. If you think there's other people you know that might find this information valuable. So for one big thing was that took place, let's start with this, was KuCoin. So KuCoin is an exchange, and it's an Asian-based exchange, and they just got hacked for $150 million. They're investigating into it with the authorities. It's a pretty serious deal. The breach affected the firm's Bitcoin, Ethereum, and also the ERC20 hot wallets after the private keys were leaked. From my understanding, it looks like they are trying to do what they can to make sure that the people that were affected get reimbursed. So that's some good news, at least for the holders. But like they try and always say in this industry space, it's always best if you hold your own money. One of the ideas with banks is that once you hand them your money, well, they own your money now, right? They could run off with it. So if you want to be most secure with your money, you need to hold it. Investing into a ledger, I have one myself. Taking it off of the exchange reduces the chances of things like this happening and you being affected. And the last thing that you want to have is have a large investment into a portfolio onto an exchange. It gets hacked, and for one reason or another, it's just gone and you lost all that money, right? So some people, they keep some on the exchanges, they keep some on hardware wallets, but if you guys do not have a hardware wallet to at least keep anything of your investments, I personally, in my opinion, because I'm not a financial advisor, I believe that it's a wise decision to get one. Looking at this, you can see that Bitfinex froze 13 million Tether USDT on EOS as part of the hack. They are in contact with major cryptocurrencies exchanges such as Huobi, Binance, OKX, BitMax, Bybit, as well as blockchain projects, security agencies, law enforcement to work on this. Some effective measures have been taken, and we will update with more details soon. The hacker, apparently this guy didn't really cover all of his bases that well, which is also a good sign that maybe they can have a leading indicator of who this is and be able to catch them. And if they catch them too, what's also great about that is not only is the money going to go back, but then people are going to learn from the mistakes, and the information of what the vulnerability was and how to protect themselves is more than likely not going to be relayed just between this exchange right here, KuCoin, but also with the other exchanges. So that means there's more higher level security, a little bit more trust and validation actually put on the exchanges. The hacker who hacked KuCoin apparently is a DeFi noob, tried to sell on Binance and then swapped the tainted USDT on Curve. All DeFi infra are natural mixers with ultra low slippage. Hackers with normal IQ will soon figure out this is not some alpha leak, and DeFi infra is designed to serve all purposes. If a hacker can hack a CEX, no point she has no idea how to successfully liquidate via DEX. So interesting information off of that. Now continuing on, talk a little bit more about Bitcoin, right? A new Israeli draft proposes exempting Bitcoin from taxation. This is great, especially if something like this can end up applying over here to the United States. A new proposal by the Israeli lawmakers might have a massive impact on Bitcoin, as the recent draft proposed to start treating the coin as a currency. A lot of places are starting to acknowledge Bitcoin as a currency. Over here in the United States, for example, there was a recent case that took place, I believe it was maybe, if I took a guess, maybe 2 months ago or so now, in which somebody had been going through trial, and it was acknowledged that the Bitcoin and the business that they were doing, they didn't have a proper license, and they addressed Bitcoin as currency. So that guy got in trouble because he didn't have the right license and how he was dealing with currency. So that's an interesting little point right there on one thing to think about. Over in Germany and in France, they were actually using terminologies by definition relating to Bitcoin as a currency. So here in Israel, a new proposal might have a big impact. The recent draft proposed to start treating the coin as a currency. If the proposal ends up becoming law, Bitcoin will officially be exempt from tax purposes. Right now, Israel still sees Bitcoin as an asset, which means that it is subjected to the capital gains tax of 25%, which is what we also have currently in the United States. So you find it interesting that in one instance, there's a court case that took place this year that identified it as a currency, yet it's still being identified as like a form of property essentially, and has capital gains. It's capital gains tax 25% for Israel. However, there are some users who found a way to pay a lower tax of 15% by undertaking bonds, related activities, or short-term lending. Furthermore, in 2019, those with income below $22,000 had a further decreased rate of only 10% on average. So, very interesting information in my opinion. What about the status of Bitcoin? Well, let's go ahead and talk about this pretty quickly. According to Cointelegraph, they suggest that the bulls have won and that there's essentially these levels that are being identified: 10,407, 10,570, 10,667 as whale clusters, the people that own a large amount of Bitcoin. In the short term, the three levels are likely to serve as a potential support area if Bitcoin remains above the $10,700 level, right? So now establishing instead of a form of resistance, it's showing that the trends are starting to reverse and it's more of a level of support. We're stabilizing a little bit more above. And you can see that 0.45 still showing a little bit of good signs. So you take a look over here on the chart for Bitcoin. Let me go ahead and close out another article now. This large rectangular box is a big consolidated space that we've seen throughout the history of Bitcoin, pushing all the way back to the 2017 period in time, right? So the levels of support, the levels of resistance, it fills within that gap space, it seems pretty often. So we want to try and avoid something like that. But if you take a look over here where we currently are at, we are just barely above the 21 EMA. We are above, but we're just barely above it. And we're also pretty darn close. I mean, just you look at it 1, 2, 3 days ago. 3 days ago, it had been inside of that big consolidated space. The fourth day ago is when it actually majorly had that push down. Although, anyway, it was within the last week overall that you see that it started to test within those waters. And if we do have a retracement back down, what you can see is this green bar pattern and the red bar pattern that I had copied. And I'll go ahead and explain this again pretty quickly. So that green pattern that we saw was essentially what had this climb up back in here coming out. So it was a little bit of a fake out. It didn't have a further continuation down, but it had a little bit of a climb up after the previous high and just kind of where it would rest. So in theory, this could potentially push, if this was to follow that pattern, it would do a couple things here. So as this is bounced off of the actual top of the resistance on the next daily, if it had established itself as a base, it's bullish if it breaks out of this symmetrical triangle base pattern here and would have a continuation up. So let's just say it has the rally up. It could rally up here and then push to the $12,500 range, potentially establishing just slightly higher before new people start to take claim, and then we might see a little bit of a retracement back and pushing it back down right around to the similar type levels. So this is a copy of a previous trend. Doesn't necessarily that it means it, but in a hypothetical scenario, I think that something like this is plausible. Retesting the $12,500 level is obviously a key identifier. If it had a bit of a retracement back, maybe what we could kind of see off of that. So that's if it breaks above. Now the red is actually more of an identifier from back here when we started to see more of that rally push down. Okay. So with that rally push down, as you can see, pushing through the actual back into the consolidated space. That's a big key section right here, is that key consolidated space. What's interesting with this is when I copied this, it fills almost like a glove with inside of that symmetrical triangle. I didn't have to readjust sizes for this stuff or anything. And by doing so, it establishes a more long-term build up, that whole shake up, waiting for the rubber band to just kind of explode, right? And by doing so, you could see kind of like a fake out opportunity here, and then it's basically waiting to the last moment before it starts to have this massive continuation down. It fills within that consolidated space as we've seen historically, and then potentially a massive drop. When I was looking at the volume, another big thing too is that down here in this volume space, let's see if I can go ahead and pull this back out here. The levels of higher volume, the last time that it took place and we saw a big level like this to this green one. So you're looking at from back on May 11th all the way to July 27th. That took 77 days. And with where we're at right now, we're at 62 days. There's different time frames that have taken place, but let's just say they were trying to mimic the previous pattern here. The large volume taking place, we're still kind of waiting on that. And so we have a lot of these patterns too, although the price has seen itself kind of starting to pull up here. You see most of these are big red candles that are taking place. The green progressively, there's more green that's overall, but the actual red and the volume as a stick has a larger big drop. We're at very high hash rates right now. So in my opinion, I'm a little bit more bearish in this circumstance for looking at it long term if it does continue to fill within the space. At this exact moment though, for short term, I'm bullish because it is above the 21 EMA. You see it having a little bit of a climb up here, and also because of the fact that we have established a bit more of a new form of support, and it is very close to breaking this resistance, a potential climb up. And so yeah, short term, I want to see what happens. I'm leaning a little bit more bullish. But a little bit more long term, if it retraces back and it fills within this triangular pattern, then I personally would be looking more bearish, especially looking at the trend pattern with the volume. We're going to have a big swing here coming up sometime soon. It could be potentially today. The weekends tend to be a little bit more calm and still, but hey, you know, there's Bitcoin. What more can I say? Anyways, guys, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit subscribe. Hit that like button, please. Let's see if we can try and get this to 50 likes. Let's see if we can try and get this to 500 subscribers. Feel free to turn on that bell notification if you want to know when we do future videos. And drop a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about all this information. If there's anything else that you would like to add that you think is really informative, really interesting news that came out. And I will see you guys in the next episode.